This is a Rooster Teeth production.
Harry, what is it?
The stuff that dreams are made of.
This is The Stuff Dreams Are Made Of. I'm writer-collector Ryan Condal.
And I'm writer-collector David Mandel, and welcome to the 11th season of The Stuff Dreams Are Made Of. Is that right? Am I even close?
I think so.
It's either season 11 or season 2, part 2. It's very confusing.
Season 4, I would say, right?
You like season 4, yes.
Like we're doing British television here. We do 6 episodes. We take a time off. We travel Europe. We enjoy the sun in Greece, and then we come back and do another one.
Yeah, all the great, I love Blackadder, they did 4 seasons and a Christmas special. So we should do a Christmas special. We should do a Stuff Dreams Are Made Of Christmas special. I think we should put that on the calendar for later on this year. I think it'll be very fun. Yeah.
Yeah, Christmas props and Christmas movies and
Ghosts
all that.
Ghosts of props, Christmas props.
Oh, I like that.
Yes, yeah.
Tonight you will be visited by 3 collectors.
By 3 props.
I wonder what's in the props of Christmas future, Dave.
Yes, very exciting. Very exciting. No props, just 3D printed garbage that falls apart in your hands.
That's very true. Yeah.
But this is the start of the next tranche of episodes. Can we say that? Yes.
We have 6 piping hot, fresh new episodes coming your way. After that, who knows? We don't know, but that involves you, if you want it back, assuming. Listen, subscribe, rate us, tell your friends, keep downloading. Anything you can do to kind of lift our profile would be very helpful. I mean, we're enjoying doing this.
Yeah, I think we love doing this. We're going to find a way of doing it, but I think in terms of us staying on this platform, I think you could make the argument we have a very dedicated listening group, but there are a finite amount of you.
Yes.
And so I think if you can get some people to listen, and I think also in this coming season, we're not only going to be talking movie props, and we will always be talking movie props, but you're going to hear us talking about, I think, collecting in general a bit, and maybe we're sort of expanding our horizons a little bit, because while we are still very obsessed on movie props, we also want to talk about the collecting world, and a lot of what we talk about connects to all those other parts. And so I think it's really a show for all collectors, not just movie prop collectors, but especially movie prop collectors. Somewhere in there is an answer.
Yeah, and I mean, as some people have probably noticed as we've gone along, we've met other kinds of collectors on the show, and we'll continue to in this forthcoming season here. And it's always interesting to talk to them because there really is a shared language between us, and it really doesn't matter who collects what. There's just there's a methodology to it. There's a psychology to it. There's a process to all collecting, whether you're doing Pez dispensers or baseball cards or comic books or antiques. The collector thinks and operates a certain way. So it's interesting to bring. I think we think it's interesting to bring other collectors in and for us to learn and hear about the other things that people collect. So that's something that we're definitely going to
Ryan,
pursue.
if you were not collecting movie props, if I just sort of erased movie props from your existence, what do you think you would be collecting? Do you think about that at all? Like, what might you be digging into a little more?
I have, I mean, I think Cars probably, which is
Cars. I could see that.
Which is a much darker road. I think just in terms of where do you the expense of them and where do you put them and where do you store them. And I don't know because obviously every collector starts in a certain place and then goes up. Like I wouldn't want to be collecting cars that I'm just putting in a garage in a museum and not driving. I would be buying interesting, probably old cars because I like old stuff to drive and enjoy and see the differences between them. But that's probably that's it for me. I mean, Dave, you collect so many things. By
the way, I just read something very interesting about Charlie Watts, who just passed away, which was that he collected cars but did not drive. He had
interesting.
an English manor with like, I don't know, like some kind of a giant barn full of these just beautiful cars. And he had different bespoke suits that matched the different cars, but just never particularly drove them. Not even sure he knew how to drive.
He just liked them.
So that would not have been you, is what you're saying.
Yeah, no, I mean, I appreciate the care. I've always been into cars. And I appreciate the kind of care and feeding of them, but I'm a driver guy. I mean, I want to go out and enjoy it, and figure out what made that car so special back in the day, and experience time travel in a certain way as you get into these cars from different generations when different technologies were available. As you go back in the past, cars become more analog, and experiencing that. What's that like, and what's a manual transmission like in a 50-year-old car, and figuring out all those kinds of things. And I mean, actually, it's funny because Jerry Seinfeld is a big car collector. Which I don't was he really into that when you guys were working together on Seinfeld, or was that not really a thing yet?
I am not a car guy, so I couldn't really tell you anything about his collection. But yes, he was very into it
already.
I know that.
Yeah.
Yes, already.
Okay.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, but I've heard him talk, and I like his comedians in cars getting coffee show on Netflix. And when he talks about a car, I feel like it's very much the way we would talk about a prop. Getting in it and remembering something about that particular era, whether he lived through it or whether it was just a car that he saw when he was a kid, and wondering about the music that they would have been listening to in the car, and where they would have been driving, and where they would have been going, and where they would have bought it. It's just, I don't know. It's there's a connectivity in there, because it's collecting is basically the curating of old things, right? Depending on no matter what you're doing, it's buying old things. So I think there's that connective tissue between all of these things.
No, I like I said, I get it, and cars I think would have been a guess I would have made of what I thought you might answer. I was just curious, again, in a world of no movie props. Yeah, just was curious.
So you collect so many things, Dave, already. Is there something that you don't collect that you could see yourself collecting?
Well, I mean, I'd love to say obviously whiskey, but also I'd love to say like Van Goghs and things like that. But I don't know. There are lots of things I've looked into that I've never sort of pursued. So it'd be very easy for me to sort of sit here and say like, yeah, I wish I had like a really cool like Kachina doll collection from like the old original, like not the mass produced ones now, but these sort of wonderful like handmade ones that you see like in some of these like Old West museums and things like that. But I don't know. I'm not sure it's a 1-for-1 replacement of comic art, like where Kachina dolls slots in. Do you know what I mean? I don't know. I probably would have pursued movie posters a lot more. I mean, beyond what I have, and maybe this is a little more of a 1-for-1. Beyond sort of like I have some movie posters, but I have Star Wars posters and things of that nature. But I definitely could see a world where I would be like going after like the Hitchcock movies and the Maltese Falcon and the movies that I really love, to have these especially interesting foreign ones. And again, I don't have the wall space for any of it, but that would have been something I always sort of think about or wished I'd pursued. But again, there's only so many hours in the day. So maybe that. But pretty close to movie props, so maybe that's not a good answer. Kachina dolls.
There you go. Well, so a question for you. I mean, if you weren't collecting props, and assuming you were still Dave the comic art collector, would you be more active in comic book art, or do you think you still kind of buy, because you're not, I mean, you're active, I would say, but you don't buy a lot of stuff in the comic art world anymore because you kind of own the stuff that you already want?
I mean, that's part of it, is I have what I want, and also the prices there have gotten so crazy, you sort of definitely have to pick your spots. And so there are definitely pieces I'm interested in that I've let go by, but when the right piece comes along, I think I'm as active as anybody. I mean, it's certainly way more expensive, but I'm definitely still active. It's just really slowed down because of the prices, where again, these numbers I don't want to make them seem insignificant, but if you, in the old days, if you'd spend $5,000 in a year, that was a big pile of art, and now that's barely a piece. And that is the difference in that hobby. And so definitely still active, but it definitely doesn't fill the time the way it used to. I guess
it's sort of funny because there was this big auction that just recently closed, and more kind of, record setting, numbers, even on splash pages and non-cover things. And it was funny to me because for a long time, I would always kind of look across the fence at you guys and be like, oh, if only I was a comic art collector, because even though the prices were still bananas over there, they were less bananas than where movie props have gotten to, at least things that that you and I are very into, the A+
movie prop pieces, yes. But now they have surpassed the A+ movie prop pieces. Yeah,
it's really quite crazy. It'd be interesting to see whether that sustains as we move out of COVID and whatever nightmare is next, and see whether people just new people have come in with money and they stay and they get bored and they move away. But it'll be fascinating. So, well, should we talk a little bit about what's yet to come in 2021?
Yeah, we've got just a really exciting, we're doing it a little differently, which is we've been banking the shows, the body of the shows, and kind of doing these introductions closer to when they're airing. So we kind of know actually already a whole bunch of things that we've got coming up. And I think it's pretty exciting. I'm particularly excited about, I guess, show 2, next week's show, which is we're going to be talking with a psychologist who wrote a book about collecting, who talks all about sort of like collecting and how it affects the brain and pleasure centers and all of that. And, dare I say, we each kind of get a little bit of a moment on the couch a little bit, kind of dig a little deeper. There was a lot of crying, a lot of tears. I think
more from
we
you.
Came to some really good places. Yeah. But I think we came to some good places. We've got another deep dive coming up, which is very, very, very exciting. So again, despite all this talk of other props and other kinds of collecting, that is going to be hardcore movie prop collecting. Yeah, exactly. All in. We've got more auction catalogs coming up that we're going to go through. Plus, we're going to be talking with a couple of these museums that have been opening up. Hopefully the Academy Museum, but definitely the Smithsonian, which is premiering a new exhibit coming up. So that's some really exciting stuff this season, season 48.
Yes,
we're very
that's
excited.
Right.
Yeah.
Series 4 of the British Stuff Dreams Are Made Of. We have an exciting central main topic tonight to launch this new segment of the show. But before we do that, we always talk what's new in props. What's new in props, Dave, after this kind of long hiatus that we've been on?
It's funny. The ultimate answer at first was going to be there wasn't much new. And then right before we kind of recorded this, I had a little bit of new, sort of one good, one bad. I'll sort of start with the bad, which was there was an auction, that auction house Hanlon's that came up just this last weekend. And there were a couple of interesting pieces. It is, Hanlon's folks, if you're listening, you gotta get some more photos up there. Your photos are very low res with an option to make them larger, and they get larger and they just get blurry. That's not my favorite thing. And there were a couple of things that I wasn't sure about, and I tried to do some research and couldn't whatever. But the one piece that kind of slipped away, and you may laugh, they had a jar and of marmalade and a sandwich from Paddington 2, and I didn't win. I got outbid. I didn't throw a high bid on it, but
that was cool. You sent that to me. I laughed.
Yeah. And I really love that movie and the idea of having something from it, but it was unclear whether it was actual marmalade or fake marmalade in the jar, and I was thinking about ants and a lot of different things, and I didn't win it, but I'm disappointed. I would love to have something. To me, Hugh Grant's greatest performance. I love that movie. I would like to have something from Paddington 2. I would take something from Paddington 1, but I really love Paddington 2. So it was a little bit of a disappointment, but
as we've discussed before, now the greatest movie of all time according to Rotten Tomatoes.
Well, I just like it, whether anyone likes it or not. But I definitely I do like it. But the other thing that did happen, I know we sort of talked a little bit about state of our collections, and one of the things I had talked a little bit about was some of the superhero stuff that I was sort of hoping to kind of replace some of the Marvel things that I was missing, and also some of the movies that I don't have. And as luck would have it, a friend listening who has a very wonderful collection ended up offering me a pretty cool Marvel piece from Iron Man, and I was very excited, and I grabbed it, and I was pretty excited about that. And when I have it in hand, I'll tell more. So it's a little bit of a tease, but it was kind of exciting to actually, I mean, obviously say something on this show and then have it happen. But more than that, it was an honest to God goal of my collecting, to find the right thing, and I felt like this was the right thing, and that was that doesn't always happen. So that part of it was kind of cool. So a pretty good what's new in props despite the Paddington 2.
Oh, that's
loss.
great. I'm
So,
looking
yeah.
forward to.
Yeah.
I'm intrigued. I'm sitting forward. I
Yeah,
want to know.
more to
I wanna
come.
know.
More to come. Yes. And how about you?
I mean, nothing as exciting as that. I've actually been doing my own collecting at work. I've been liberating more and more pieces from the show. I gotten the taste for it. I've gotten a little bit bolder, and now I just ask for things, and things tend to show up in my trailer at the end of the day. So I've been enjoying that.
But some of the things you got to make sure. I mean, it's funny, when I was taking things at the back end of Veep, and we've talked a little bit about that. The good news there was obviously we were done. Veep was over. I could kind of give me that. We don't need it anymore. You obviously still, in a perfect world, have many, many seasons to film. So, obviously, are you taking? What are you taking? You can't take are you taking things that are finite in the sense of this is a scene and that character, whatever, dies or doesn't use it again? Or are you simply taking things and they'll figure it out?
I mean, I always ask. And I mean, what I've been trying to do is it's the thing that I think every collector would love is to know which scene specifically I know it's used in the film, which scene specifically was this used in. And there've been a couple of key things that I've wanted and a couple of key scenes that have been shot where at the end of the day I will ask, or at the end of the sequence, to make sure the film has all been shot, that hey, can I take one of those? Because usually there's multiples, or whatever you're doing, there's multiples.
Sure, of course.
And I always ask, and sometimes I'm told no, but you can have it at the end because we just need to make sure that we're clear, or there's this other thing that we're doing that we need to make sure that we have it so that we can keep continuity and all that. I've been doing that and sort of pulling aside the call sheet of that day, so I always remember, oh, this is what was filming when I liberated that particular thing.
Do some of your key props get listed occasionally on the call sheet? That's something sometimes obviously we do, which is if something important is, that gets called out specifically in the script, it will be listed on the call sheet. So
yes, a couple of these things have.
That's excellent. Yeah.
So so doing a little more of that. Our fan interaction has really improved through our multiple social channels. People are emailing us and sending us messages through Twitter. We actually have a Facebook page now, Dave. Which I don't.
Wait,
yeah,
what?
I don't know that. I don't remember where quite we were, whether it existed before we wrapped the first half of the season, but now we have one.
I think it existed, but it was mostly for anti-vax kind of.
Well,
messaging.
Obviously,
but we've changed
yes,
it. We've changed it. Yeah.
Correct. So you still get all the Russian ad content that you want on Facebook, but you also get to talk about movie props. So that's very exciting. It's at Props Podcast, just like all of our other stuff. It's called The Stuff Dreams Are Made Of. I don't know Facebook that well, but it's a Facebook page where you can go in and chat and message us, and I think message each other. So we were hoping that would engage some interaction amongst the fans, because the fans are able to interact with us. It'd be great if they interact with each other. I've been offered one of these connects. I've been offered an actual piece from one of our listeners, which I was sort of debating. The price was a little high at an auction a couple of years ago. I talked about it on the podcast. I passed on it. It was offered to me, but I didn't really love the hammer price then, and I don't think the guy certainly wants to take a loss on it. So I've been umming and ahhing, as they say here in England, about it. But it was very cool to have that come through, because as Dave and I have said, the reason that we wanted to start this podcast was so that we could find more people with cool stuff to give us to add to our collections. And then there was this other thing that came through. We had been talking for a while. It was a message from a listener named Kyle McElhaney. Hello, Kyle. And
hi, Kyle.
He had heard us talking about prop authentication, and he works in I guess 3D scanning, 3D printing in that world, and it actually suggested that there would be a way to take a prop and basically 3D scan it, like laser scan it, and have a digital record of exactly that piece with all of its little dings and dents and imperfections in the if there's embedded scratches in the in the wood grain or whatever it is, an imperfection in the mold, this would be perfectly captured on this digital record. And it's not an NFT, but it's a way of having a digital record of that piece. So if somebody down the line is like, oh, hey, I have that piece for sale, you could always go back to that digital record and make sure that they were the same thing. And I thought that was actually a really interesting way to kind of keep track of all this stuff. And as collectors move on, so much of this is about the stories and who did you get it from and who did he get it from, and now things have changed hands multiple times since coming off of the show or coming from through the crew member. This would be a really interesting way to keep track of these things.
It also seems like a really fabulous way of 3D printing fakes.
Well,
that's just that's where my
obviously,
head goes.
But yes, I'd like to think we could tell the difference.
No, it is an interesting thing of keeping track of a piece, but also keeping track of pieces that show up in auction in general, so that when something shows up, you can kind of go, oh wait, that was that piece, be it real or fake, of kind of like, that was that piece that was pulled from that other auction. Here it is resurfacing, just in terms of trying to police things also. I definitely see it. Again, I'm not sure, how one creates sort of this central database. It would almost behoove one of the auction houses to start doing it themselves and then see if others adopted it. That seems like perhaps the way it happens.
That's where I would think it would have to start, because you don't want to get the third party that's like the comic and action figure grading companies, because they have their own methodology and their own motivations as to why they do these things and how they track and how they grade. So I think this would ideally be done by the auction house. Like if Prop Store was about to auction off a big piece, they scan it, then they have the record of it, so that if anybody comes back to them years down the line wanting to make sure that it's the same thing, the same hat, the same sword, whatever, they can do that.
Right. But also, I mean, this is where it gets difficult. If you're sort of walking through your prop department with a big shopping cart and loading it up with stuff from House of the Dragon, when are you scanning that stuff?
No, I mean, I'm not. Question. I'm just saying this is a good idea for other people with time to do.
But speaking, I guess, in some way of House of the Dragon, how's that for a segue?
Excellent. Well, so tonight we're very excited to get our guest. We've been promising you a celebrity collector for a long time now. I don't think we had a real plan until recently as to how to actually pull that off.
Let's be honest, we had no plan, and you called in a favor. There's really the honest answer. Yeah,
we rarely do, but we can think of no person more relevant to the show. He's a legend. We've talked about him a lot.
We talk about him a lot, and it's about time that we finally had him on. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. George
R.R. Martin.
Yes, exactly.
Hello.
Yes, very good. Man who needs no introduction, but obviously the author of A Song of Ice and Fire, the producer of many television shows, including Beauty and the Beast, starring Linda Hamilton and Ron Perlman, the executive producer of one show, Game of Thrones, creator, writer of Fire and Blood, which is now currently being made into a small TV show over here in London, England. And we're and also, as we have him on tonight, a bit of a collector. So we're excited to talk to him tonight. George, welcome. It's very good to have you. Thank you for joining us.
No, my pleasure. I'm glad to be here.
Good. So, I mean, just diving right in, I mean, this is a collecting podcast. Dave and I are writer. We call ourselves writer collectors. We mostly talk about collecting on this podcast. For us, it's film and television memorabilia. For you, it's a lot of different things. We've sort of talked about them over the years, but I mean, what interests you now? What are the things, the bits that intrigue you and you like to collect and fill your houses with now?
Well, I mean, it's interesting that word collector. I think I have accumulated over the years collections, but I never set out in most cases to be a collector. Like I have quite a big collection of books, but I thought of myself as a reader. I would buy the book, and then after I was finished it, I would put it on the shelf. I never really bought a book just to have a rare book in my collection or anything like that. I bought them to read. The one thing that probably I am clearly a collector in it is my collection of old toy soldiers and new toy soldiers and miniature knights. When I was a little kid in Bayonne, New Jersey, I had a toy castle and I had little toy knights that I played with as a kid. And at some point I got rid of them. I don't know, the way they went away, the way many toys do as you grow up. But in the 90s, I was writing Game of Thrones, and the other books in the Song of Ice and Fire series. And I was very much into the whole, knights and tournaments and heraldry. I was researching all of that. And I started buying some toy knights. And first, just the ones that you got at the Toys R Us or similar stores, little boxes of 6 plastic knights and all that. But then I started getting books about them and reading the history of this and finding out the old knights that had been made by companies like Britton's in the 50s and the 40s and the 30s, and people like Ping and Courtney and some of the other real artists who were making them. And I started picking up some of those too. And I knew I was lost when I started going to the Old Toy Soldier Show in Chicago and buying them from dealers and, buying custom ones and all that. And at first I had like one little case that was mounted on the wall, had like 6 shelves. And I said, well, this will hold my collection forever. And now, of course, I have an entire room with, and hundreds, if not thousands of these things.
As it goes.
I was going to ask, are they all knights though still, or did you expand into other soldiers, if you will?
They're all either knights or medieval figures from
Gotcha.
actual history or fantasy figures. But I have resisted the urge to expand to other periods because you can really go down a rabbit hole there, and I would need like 3 other houses.
It's a dangerous road, as we know. Yes.
Yes. I mean, medieval figures like I collect are one of the 3 or 4 or 5 periods that toy soldier collectors collect, but they're not the top one by any means. In the UK, where you are, Ryan, a lot of the collectors really go into the British Imperial figures, the Zulu Wars, and the Delhi Durbar, and all of the great things of the height of the British Empire. In America, the biggest collecting area is the American Civil War, Union and Confederate troops. But I've avoided both of those areas. And one thing I like about the Knights is that you're unique. They are unique. Every figure is unique, has its own heraldry, has its own shield.
Well, I was going to say it's interesting because this sort of began the Knights are the thing that you did in your childhood, and Dave and I obviously collect different things here, but the thing that we always talk about is that it's nostalgia, right? And we collect movies from movies that inspired us as children, that we loved as children. There's a warm memory that brings us back to it, and it seems to be the same with you, but with Toy Knights.
I was curious just in terms of these knights, and you said it's not the top rung, but are there still, I guess I'll simply say, rare ones that you are hunting for? Like, do you have how obsessive do you get? Is there a master checklist in your head of like the 10 you're still searching for? Or is it more as you see them, as you like the look of them, that kind of a thing? Like, I just was wondering to what degree the sickness is kind of like where you fall between accumulator and collector, even on the Knights. I was kind of curious.
Yes. There's sort of a 2-part answer to that. I mean, the traditional toy soldiers that were made, mass manufactured by Britton's and Mignot in France and other figures, made of metal. People called them tin soldiers, but they really weren't made of tin. They kind of faded out in the 50s. One by one, people switched to plastic. And some of those plastics are nice too, and I also have those in my collection. But then in like the late 70s and the 80s, people started making what were called new old toy soldiers, and new companies popped up. And these were not mass manufactured figures. These were made for collectors in relatively small numbers, not tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands, but hundreds of these figures. And then when the Soviet Union fell, a lot of Russians got into that, and God, the Russian figures are gorgeous and gorgeously painted. And when they first came out, were actually quite inexpensive. They've gotten more expensive since. So in those cases, I see these new soldiers that are still coming out from a number of companies, and I pick them up. They're wonderful. They're dynamic. They make great displays. I like them too. But the old toy soldiers, yeah, that's a case of I'm looking for specific things to fill in a range. For a toy night collector, the ultimate figures were made by a man named Richard Courtney, who lived in the UK and started making the figures in the 1920s and continued to make them up to his death, which I believe was in the 60s. And he did the entire work himself. I mean, he sketched the figure out, and he sculpted the original, and then he cast it with his own molds, which were made of like bronze. And then he painted them. He hand-painted themselves in accurate heraldry. And they were sold at a few small shops in England. Probably Courtney never made more than like 10,000 copies of any particular figure. And some of his figures were rarer than that because they weren't very popular. Oddly enough, the least popular ones during his lifetime are the ones that are now rarest and hardest to find. Sure. You know, like he made a number of figures of like wounded guys and dead guys lying on the ground, and the kids of the 40s and 50s didn't want to buy the dead guys, and now the dead guys are hard to find and valuable. But when Courtney died, his figures were so in demand that another guy named Freddie Ping took them over, and he used Courtney's molds to continue to make these figures, but he varied the poses. He took the top of one and the other, he'd combine the two. He varied the poses somewhat, and he painted them in his own style, which was much looser than Courtney's. And he made them for like a decade, from the 60s to the 70s, until he passed away. And at that point, yet another guy, Peter Greenhill, who's still active, he inherited the Courtney molds, and he's been making them ever since. And he's a gorgeous painter. So, you know, you can find all these figures, and it's like, well, I want to find a number 22 pose. Greenhill wrote a book about them, Heraldic Miniature Knights, which is like the Bible for toy soldier.
Oh, great.
When I was a kid, I loved knights. I remember buying books of heraldry when I went to like London for the first time. I was really into it. Used to design all my own like fake heralds and all that kind of stuff.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, I was very into it. I really loved it. And yet I never wrote any sort of book that HBO turned into anything. I just want to say it didn't work. It didn't take. But anyway, so be it. So be it.
It's okay, Dave. You've done fine. We're all very proud of you. Well, but I was going to ask. I mean, not knowing anything about this particular collecting field, I imagine you can probably go out and buy kind of anything you want, assuming it's available. But is the thrill to you finding it at a show or a convention, at a shop, or do you, like, if there was something that you were really searching for, I mean, couldn't you put a bounty out on it and just have somebody go find it and get it for you? Or is that what sort of gets the collector engine started in you? Well,
there are shows that you can go to. There's one, the Old Toy Soldier Show in every year in Chicago in September. Is a great show to go to, and there's a lot of collectors there selling items from their collection, and there's a lot of the manufacturers of the new old toy soldiers who are there, and they come out with new figures for every show, and those are gorgeous figures too. Those are and you're buying them new, probably more than you could find room to place on your shelf. So when I can, I like to go to that show and buy things. There is also the thrill of, it's actually weird. I had just started collecting these things in the 90s, the late 90s, I think it was, and I walked into an antique store, a bric-a-brac kind of a store in Albuquerque, and I found an old castle complete with like 100 figures for ridiculously low price. It was an incredible find that I just found walking into this antique store among the pottery and the old toys and the, all the other stuff that they were selling. So I continue to go into antique stores from time to time to see if they have any old toy soldiers or something on display. And occasionally I find something. I've never found another, that was like they planted the hook with that one, and I made an incredible strike just starting, and I've never had another find as good as that one in all of the decades since. But that was a big thrill. A lot of the figures, though, especially the old ones, the Courtneys and all that, are when they are sold, they're sold on eBay or they're sold by Sotheby's or various other auction houses, and they're auctioned off. So, yeah, I guess I could get all of them if I was willing to drop, all the money in the world on them. But I'm not. I know more or less what they're worth, but all it takes for an auction, if you've ever bid on stuff on eBay, is two people who want it, two people who really, really want it, and God knows where it can go.
Will you bid occasionally? Do you see something like, I'm not talking about all the time, but have you bid? Do you follow so you will. Okay, cool.
Not recently. I've been very busy recently, but a few years I was regular on eBay, and I was always I still have my save searches, and I look at things on eBay, and it alerts me if there's something that I want.
Are you active with Sotheby's and the live auction houses?
When they do toy soldier things, I get the catalogs from some of the major ones, and see if there's anything I want to bid on.
Do you find, and this is sort of an odd question, but it's definitely happened, I think, it's definitely happened to me in some of the stuff I collect, maybe a little bit more, maybe not exactly the prop world, but other things that I've collected where, and again, obviously you have a much sort of, what's the word? You're obviously, famous. I'm sort of occasionally some fans know, whatever. But do you find yourself targeted? Meaning like someone will send you something, whether it's a dealer or a toy store that you've dealt with, and they're like, yeah, we've tracked down this rare Courtney that you are looking for, but now they're trying to jack the price up on you. Like, it should be X, maybe you'd pay 2X, but they're looking for 10X because you're you. Has that happened to you at all a little bit, or?
No, that actually hasn't happened. I don't know if the people in the toy soldier world know that I'm me.
Well, it's about to happen now that this podcast is happening.
That's
you're
my fear.
Screwed.
We're very sorry.
That will not be good. But no, that hasn't happened so far. Thank God.
It's unfortunately, these things, anything of value, I guess, is it sort of sucks. But yeah, you do get targeted when people either know what you want or assume you're an idiot, I guess. But either or is unfortunately one of the we've talked about it on the show a little bit of the darker side of collecting a little bit, unfortunately. When you, I guess, dare I say, came to fame when the show sort of hit, obviously you had the book following, but I will admit I became aware of you when the show first premiered. And that's when I actually went and read the books, which is neither here nor there. But in my other collecting world, which is a lot of original comic art, what I remember when I became aware of you was when people started publishing or reprinting some of your old Marvel letters to the editor that they tracked down and whatnot. And actually, I've been thinking about this, and I don't know, there's no reason you would remember this, but I actually started to realize a minute or two ago, I think I met you once, possibly in Sushi Nozawa with Len Wein. I think I may have met you once and said hello in Los Angeles in the Valley.
Well, Len was certainly a friend of mine.
Len was a really good friend of mine as well. So yeah.
Whenever I went to LA, I would get together with Len and Christine Bellata, his wife, and we would go out and have a meal or something together.
So I think exactly. Hulk 181, among other things, and obviously Giant Size X-Men 1,
the new
Wolverine.
X-Men.
Yep, exactly. No, I was really lucky. I was a huge comic art fan and a huge comic fan. I was lucky enough to get to know Len and become friends with him, and obviously Christine a little less so, although we're still in contact, and actually ended up later on actually getting some art from him, which was a wonderful thing. But my favorite thing was he would invite me to play poker with him and a bunch of the other guys. So
I was at his poker game.
Oh, okay, that's
twice.
hilarious.
Yes.
That's excellent. You were not at the game I was at, but it was for me, I was like instantly.
Those were good poker players.
Yeah, they
man.
were really good poker players.
I think
yeah.
I'm a pretty good poker player, but playing with those guys, those were sharp.
I'm a
Giving them your
terrible
money.
poker player, but I was so happy to be playing with Len Wein and Marv Wolfman. I did not care. I would have just kept being in the pot just to hear the stories. It was fantastic. So
Right.
do you still have comics? Did you collect comics, or were you more of, again, you say accumulator versus collector. Were you just a fan and a reader? Like, where does comics fit into your world? I was curious.
Yeah, I was a big comics fan. I first met Len actually at the very first comic convention ever held,
wow.
New York City, 1964, I believe it was, and I was the first person to register for that. So my badge actually said number 1.
Oh, wow.
I numbered it.
So you're
in some ways,
pretty
I'm
hardcore.
I'm
yeah.
the first comic
Okay.
fan. Yes, I was in high school then.
Did you keep the badge?
I think I do. I'd have to look around and find it. But that was, there were like 30 of us in one room one day in Greenwich Village, in some kind of union hall called the Working Man's Hall or something. They rented, and Len and a guy named Bernie Bubnis put that first con together, and then they had a fight. So they were, they were denouncing each other in handouts when you came there. But I met Steve Ditko at that thing.
Oh my
I think it was
God,
the
really?
only convention Steve Ditko ever went
Wow.
to. Very first convention, and I remember talking to him and saying how much I liked Spider-Man and Doctor Strange, and Ditko said Doctor Strange was his favorite. He was very nice. But then he must not have had a good time, because I don't think he ever went to another convention.
George, Dave has an incredible Steve Ditko original art.
Oh, really?
I love
really
the original comic art in general, but Ditko is my guy, including I have Spidey 26 complete. I have the original art to every page of the issue. I can.
Oh my
I have
God.
a giant binder, like an art portfolio, and you can flip through and read the entire issue. It is my pride and joy. I love Ditko art. His line.
Now, did you get that from Steve, or
No,
did you buy it at an auction?
I bought it from a dealer years after. My understanding, and it's funny, there's a Ditko exhibit that the family is putting on in Pennsylvania right now, in his hometown, and they apparently have Xeroxes of the 2 issues I think that he held on to, which was, I think, issue 5 with Dr. Doom, and I think there was another one, maybe his last issue, I think, or the 2 issues. And then rumor has it he had a lot of Doctor Strange, because as you just said, it was his favorite. So,
well, I never had, I read the comics and I kept the comics, but I never had any original art or anything like that. In those days in high school, I did write letters to the editor, and to both Marvel and DC. So some of my earliest publications were my letters that were printed in Fantastic Four and Avengers, and I think I may have had some in Spider-Man. I don't recall. Oddly enough, though, DC never printed any of my letters. I wrote an equal number of letters to Julie Schwartz for JLA and Flash and Green Lantern, all the edit things that Julie Schwartz edited. And in those days, if you had a letter in a DC comic, they gave you a page of original art. So I wanted that page of original art.
If you had been in the Flash, if they printed your letter, you'd have Flash art to this day.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
And later on, I became quite friendly with Julie Schwartz. I got to know Julie, and we had dinner together many times, and visited each other at San Diego or science fiction conventions. Julie was one of the first science fiction fans, long before he got involved in comics. And I always said, Julie, why did you print any of my letters? And he said, they weren't very good. You should have written better letters. He just gave me grief about that, but that was great. Oddly enough, Stan, who I met like 6 times, the guy who did print my letters, clearly, he was friendly enough, but he had no idea who the hell I was. And every time I met him, it was like meeting him for the first time. It was like, hey, good to meet you. And I met you at the last convention too. But, so it's odd. The guy who printed all my letters doesn't remember me, and Julie and I became friends. So life is full of these little ironies.
Did you keep your comic books?
Yeah, I still have them, but I don't I still do graphic novels and all that, but I stopped buying the mainstream comics some time ago. I got tired of all of the reboots and the changes. I mean, I hate the whole concept of a reboot. It's like hard to express this without feeling sounding idiotic, but of course I knew that the Flash and Spider-Man were not real, right? But there's a implied contract between the reader and the writer when you're reading something. It's like, okay, you're reading about Spider-Man and you're assuming that he's real. And these are the adventures of Spider-Man. These are the things that happen to Spider-Man. And then when they reach the point where they're saying, no, none of this actually happened, we're starting it all over, it feels like all these issues that I read, all these things that I read, they didn't happen now. And now new things are happening and the characters are different. I didn't like that, I like the idea of building on what went before. How can I get emotionally involved with these things when I know they're not, anything that happens can be wiped out by the next writer to take over the strip or the book.
It's definitely, I kind of agree. And I think part of it is the longer you read, the more invested you are. And it is, I always jokingly said they were, comics are like my soap operas. I was like, instead of every day at 2:00 watching whatever Days of Our Lives, whatever, I read the X-Men or Spider-Man. And then for me, there was a point where, I don't know, Spider-Man told everybody his secret identity and then they had it, everybody forgot it. And I just went, nope, I'm done. Bye-bye. And you just go, oh, I'm good. But what I wanted to ask you was, forgetting about the new, let's go back to the old. Let's talk about like a Steve Ditko kind of a thing. Like, does the idea now, like would original comic art, does that interest you? Or like, yes, but not enough to like actually buy something? Like where does Marvel or DC or the idea of like spending money on something like or even an old comic book you haven't added to your comic collection? That's not something you're currently accumulating.
No,
you just have your old books. Gotcha.
Right. Yeah. One of the big issues, and I'm sure you guys you probably have dealt with it in your other shows, is where you put all this stuff. At a certain point when I was collecting the toy Knights, I also got into buying toy castles, and I even commissioned some to be built, and they're spectacular. They're great, but the main scale of most of the things I collect for toy Knights is 54 millimeter scale, so the figures are like 2.5 inches high. And imagine a castle designed to fit those figures. What's a big
built
thing?
To scale?
And, you put it on a shelf, or you put it on top of your desk, or you build a special shelf in the corner for it. It takes up a lot of room, and it doesn't really hold that many figures, because you can't line up the figures like you do on a shelf. So I have these gorgeous toy castles that have like 20 figures in them. And in the equivalent amount of space, if I did just bookshelf displays, I could have 200 figures. So I sort of backed off a little from that unless I stumble on things. And it's the same thing with for one thing, it's the same thing with books. I have so many books now. I don't get rid of things. I'm a pack rat, so I don't purge my collection. There are books I know I'm never going to read this book again. I didn't like it that much the first time, but it's still there on my shelf. At a certain point, where do you put all these things? They take up a lot of room. And you guys, of course, with your movie props, they probably take up a lot more room than my little toy soldiers or whatever. And where do you put them all?
Yes, well, we have fewer of them generally because of the relative cost, so that always helps keep it down. But it's funny to hear you talk about all these things. Again, we've talked to different collectors in the show. A completely different collection, toy soldiers and painted knights and things, but they are. The thought process that you go through in if I buy that one, if I start that new wing of the collection, I'm worried that I won't just have the one, it'll become a thing. And then where do I put it and how do I caretake for it and insure it and all that? Dave and I go through that same thing all the time.
No,
with
it's
other
the
stuff.
the collections change, but the problems are the same. The thought
Exactly.
process
Right.
is the same, which is kind of interesting. I mean, I think it's what binds us all together as collectors, which is I'm fascinated. I mean, I'm ready to look up Courtney
Yeah, I'm into
figures
it. I wanna
online,
know.
and I want to see what
What's
they
the
look
Holy
like.
Grail?
And
Yeah.
and I need to stop myself from buying one as we're speaking right now, just to own one. So that is a problem which we're working on. That's a separate thing we're working on with specialists. But
We
it
have a
is funny
psychologist
that-
now.
Yeah, that collecting is collecting, which is one of the things we've learned. Yeah.
Now, George, with comics, because we've talked about this before, because this is actually something that we all share, because we were all of our own generation, big comic book readers and collectors. The three of us were, and by the way, all grew up in the greater New York, New Jersey area and are all New York Giants fans. I just want to point it out. And George and I actually have a shared Bayonne heritage because I married a girl from Bayonne. So, there's some heavy, tri-state area mojo going on in this podcast here, especially when it comes to comic books.
We know the glory of the Jersey bar pie.
Yes, I still need to get you to try the great Cafe Bello in Bayonne. I went to the Victoria, El Victoria? What was it? What's it?
Yeah, the Victoria
the Vic,
Tavern.
The Vic.
Yeah,
The Vic.
yeah.
Yes.
Had a kielbasa pizza.
Oh, I didn't do that. But yes, no, that
The
place is
unity of the
terrific.
Italian and Polish minorities in Bayonne.
And the crowd in there was like right out of Sopranos Central Casting. It was glorious.
Yeah. I pity you now, Ryan. You're in London. Where do you get a pizza? Come on.
Yeah. Oh, forget it. Pizza, sushi, tacos. You name it. Lots of meat pies for me now, George. I eat a Westerosi diet here.
And Indian food. They do have great Indian food in
Yes,
London.
terrific Indian food.
Really good Indian food, really great Middle Eastern food. So there are some things.
The food is good. You just have to kind of change your your expectation what you're going to have and where you're going. Whereas LA is like, sort of a pan cuisine. Like anything that you want, you can get. And I think New York kind of the same way.
Right.
But we digress. I was going to ask about specific comic books. Like I always, as a kid, I always coveted certain quote unquote back issues. We used to call them the past issues. I was always reading modern comics because it was what I could afford. And when I saved up enough money, I would go back and buy things that were in the past, but things that major issues like the Dark Phoenix saga and like the Wolverine limited series, the things that I really wanted, because I was collecting the sort of late 80s, early 90s period. So I would try to go back and buy things, but I could never afford to go back and buy Incredible Hulk 181, the first appearance of Wolverine and these things that I really wanted, the first appearance of the Punisher, Amazing Spider-Man #1, Amazing Fantasy 15. Were there things from because I know you were collecting at a time where a lot of these issues were contemporary. You could buy them off the newsstand, but were there things that you wanted?
I am much older than you, and that speech of yours just made me realize it.
Well, I didn't mean I wasn't rubbing it in, George, but I was asking. I mean,
most of those things that you coveted, I bought new off the stands.
There you go.
For whatever they were going for. But I had the same situation. I mean, I was there for the birth of comic fandom. Not only the first Comic-Con, but there'd always been comic book fans. They were a subset of science fiction fans.
Yeah.
And then in the very late end of the 50s and the early 60s, comic fandom broke off and started having its own fanzines and its own conventions, and people started buying and selling the back issues. Of course, I read comic books from when I was just a little kid, and I had a collection of comic books. I wouldn't call it a collection. I had an accumulation of comic books, but at a certain point, I started reading real books, science fiction novels and all that, and I decided I was too old for comics, and I got rid of all those early comic books that I had, and I gave up comics for like a year, maybe 2 years, and then I started reading them again because they were, thankfully, the candy store where I bought my comics, the comic racks were right next to the spinner racks where I bought my paperback science fiction, so I couldn't help seeing the covers. And it was just when Julie Schwartz was getting the Silver Age going, and in DC, and Stan Lee and Jack Kirby and Steve Ditko were launching the Marvel Age. So I started reading it again, and those are the ones that I accumulated and still had. But when I got involved in comic fandom, I always liked the group books. So I loved the Fantastic Four, I loved the Avengers, and before that, the JLA. And I'm reading these comic fanzines, and they're all talking about the JSA, the Justice Society. And that's the one I really wanted. I wanted some of these golden age issues of all-star comics with the Justice Society. I really would have killed for those at a certain point. But people wanted like $10 for an issue. I didn't have $10.
I was the same way. I mean, I remember being able, I remember the Hulk 181 was like $200, and I just couldn't imagine, I didn't have that money, and I couldn't imagine if I did, I would just put it all into one issue. And now, now look at it. I mean, it's great. But did you ever go back? Did you ever, as now successful published writer, as an adult, just to have that thing that you coveted when you were a kid? Did you? I never did, but did you go back and do that?
I did not. I accumulated at a certain point a few Golden Age comics, but they were the cheap Golden Age comics that nobody else wanted. I just wanted a few Golden Age things in my book, So I had I got some issues of Jeep comics, which was about a guy who had a Jeep. Nobody was really looking for those. All of my comic books were read. It's cool that comic books became valuable, but I hate and despise this slabbing tendency of taking a comic book and putting it in plastic and giving it a grade, and you can't read it. Now, I have a friend who is a big baseball fan, and he collects baseball cards. And that's where this thing came from. And I could see slabbing baseball cards. You encase the baseball card in plastic, and you can still see the front and the back. And that's all you need to see in a baseball card, right? And plastic prevents it from degenerating. But a comic book is not a baseball card. There's more to it than the cover. There are pages with a story. And if you encase it in plastic, you can't read the story anymore.
Well, and this is what I've talked about, and even though I'm the youngin in this, and Dave always says, I always love it. Dave always says he never remembers how young I am until I talk about my terrible taste in comic books, because that's what makes him remember the generation that I'm from. But the thing that I had, and I'm old enough to remember a time when there weren't collected trade paperbacks. I mean, I remember there were like the original run of 10 of the X-Men and the original, the first 10 issues of Superman.
No, you would be able to get the important stuff, maybe
Golden Age, yes.
But nowadays you can get
read anything
you ever wanted.
So for me, getting the Wolverine limited series was yes, about owning it, but it was really about reading it. I had heard so many things about those 4 issues and the story in Japan. There was no way to get that unless you bought those comics or you knew somebody that had them would let you read them. So for me, I agree with you, and I hate the slabbing. I think it's commodified the whole thing, and it used to be like buying a used book. It was like mint. Very fine, pretty good, and then on down you go. And now it's a 9.8 is $10,000 more than a 9.6. I just don't care. And in fact, as a movie memorabilia collector, Dave and I we look for signs of age and character and wear.
Yeah, we actually are looking for the dents and the scratches, which are, of course, the things that would ruin a comic book. But it shows maybe that it was more possibly used.
More loved.
Yeah, more like, this is the one from that scene, as opposed to an extra one that never made it past the set or the prop room or something. Yeah.
And if I buy Hulk 181, I want to look at it and know it's not a modern reprint. Whereas if you buy the 9.8 Hulk 181, it's just going to look like the modern reprints they've done a million of. Whereas if you buy one that's a little a little dog-eared and a little yellow, it kind of speaks to the age of the thing, which I think that's part of the charm of it. But I digress. Shall we shift gears to film? Should we talk about the really good stuff?
I want to hear more about toy soldiers, but okay, fine.
Okay. But that'll be part 2 of our never-ending podcast. So George, as you know, it's the stuff dreams are made of. It's a podcast about collecting film and television memorabilia, the things that delight Dave and I from our own childhoods.
So what is the Honus Wagner card in your collecting?
Oh.
What is it? Is it like the Maltese Falcon or the original Rosebud sled?
Yeah. Yeah, the ruby slippers.
Yeah, it would those would be up there. And then I think each movie probably there are certain key movies that have their own Honus Wagners, so that like, if you're talking about specifically Star Wars, I think a lightsaber would be like a Honus Wagner of Star Wars.
Right.
So, I think there are individual ones and group ones. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I know, the ruby slippers, anything, major pieces from major seminal films, particularly fantasy films. I think where things are custom made. I mean, Citizen Kane is a different beast, but something that's custom made that's instantly identifiable with that film. A film like Casablanca is a little tougher because it's probably Bogart's trench coat. The Maltese Falcon, it's that wonderful piece from that film that's instantly recognizable, but it would be great to have something from Maltese Falcon. But other than the Falcon, you're talking about a suit or like a cigarette lighter or something like that. So it really depends on what it is and how quickly you can identify it with the film. I know you're a big film guy. I mean, you and I have talked film a bunch of times. You actually own a movie theater in Santa Fe. Which is a wonderful place. Anybody that visits Santa Fe should go to the Jean Cocteau and take in a film, eat the popcorn. It's delightful.
And we had the Colony premiere one year.
We did.
The red hats. I still have my red hat.
We do. Yeah. Oh, fantastic. See, you are a pack rat. You don't really get rid of anything. I don't have those anymore. But do you have a favorite film? Do you have one that's your go-to if somebody asks that? Oh, it's definitely this.
Well, certainly for science fiction fantasy, it's Forbidden Planet, MGM.
Oh, great.
1956. And I own a couple replicas from that, but they're not the original props. I have a Robbie the Robot, a fully functional, full-size
a full
Robbie
size
the
one.
Robot.
Wow, cool.
Fantastic.
And also the saucer, the C-57D. And Robbie is in my office here, and the C-57D hangs in my bookstore. And those are both made by this guy, Fred Barton in L.A. You can look him up online. Fred Barton, the robot guy. And he's got these licenses to make replicas of robots from almost all the great science fiction films. I mean, he has Robbie the Robot, of course, which is the first one he made, but he also has the Iron Giant. He has Tobor from Captain Video. He has the little robots from Silent Running. He has Cylons from the original. You can buy all these things, and you can buy the C-57D or the Martian War Machines from the George Powell War of the Worlds. I have one of those too. They're not full size, but some of his stuff Robbie is exactly. It's actually better than the original because the original was a costume that had a little man inside it. Fred's are actual robots. I mean, it unfortunately can't make you coffee or Star Sapphires, but it does talk. It knows all the dialogue from the film, so you can turn it on and the head turns and the lights move. And I love my Robbie.
An original Robbie sold a few years ago for a lot of money. I think $5 million, something like that. I think it went through Profiles. Dave, do you remember this?
I definitely was Profiles. I don't remember the price, but it was definitely a lot. I'm trying to remember.
Maybe it was Bonhams. Maybe it was a Bonhams one.
I don't know.
It was
I was trying to remember if that ended up in the Seattle, the museum up there.
Yeah.
I think it may have. The Paul
Allen.
Yeah.
He was a big collector of film memorabilia and a nemesis of Dave's. Dave lost a Darth Vader helmet to him.
Oh dear!
At some point, he's recounted his tale. But Dave now owns a Darth Vader helmet, so he got his revenge.
As these items become collectible and as they become valuable, inevitably there's the danger of counterfeits or replicas entering it. How do you authenticate that what you're getting is actually the Darth Vader helmet from the film and not just a replica that someone made?
In the specific case of the Vader helmet, just to give an example, and these are things we talk about on the show, but I can be specific there, which is number one, in terms of the inside, the markings, the way it's made, the construction, and again, all things that could be duplicated. You're absolutely right. It matches up with photo research from the period of the other helmets. There's a numbering system. There are certain numbers, and all of that matched up very well. Beyond that, you're looking for what we call screen matches, which is because of all of the 4K stuff now, you can go in really tight on individual frames and you can see individual scratches, paint drops,
a wood grain,
irregularities, perhaps even in a
stitching,
mold pour, all sorts of things like that. A particular zipper handle or a tiny screw that you don't see in the wide shot. And so in the case of the Vader, there are some very specific, as crazy as it sounds, errant paint drops that I can match up like one for one and just basically screen match it to scenes in both Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi.
It's wonderful.
And it's incredible, but it is a lot of work and you don't always know.
Are there records of how many of these things were made?
Yes.
And Citizen Kane, how many copies of the Rosebud sled did they have? Is there any record of that? And it's like, well, there were 6 of them, and we know where they are. This collector owns number 1, and this collector owns the other.
Interesting, you should ask.
I'm not sure it's ever complete, but go ahead, Ryan. Sorry.
Well, so remember at the end of the film they burned it in the fire. So there are actually a large number of balsa wood sleds that are out there because they built a bunch of them to use in this burn scene. And lightweight ones that were painted. So they're real. They were made, they were made for the production. But the one that ended up on film was burned, and they got such a great take early on. It was the first or the second take that they didn't use this whole swath backup of these balsa wood sleds. So they have made it into private hands, and there were like, I don't know, there were a bunch. There were 10, say 6 to 10, something. It was a number of them that made it into private hands. The hero sled. There's
also the sled that he's using when he was a boy that he's actually sledding with.
Yes, there's probably only one of those, and very famously, I think Steven Spielberg, early on in his successful career, because Citizen Kane was such a big film for him, bought what he thought was the original hero sled at auction, only to find out it was balsa wood. Yes, it's from the production, but it's not the hero sled, and it probably was unused because if it was one of the balsa wood sleds that didn't burn, you never saw it on camera. So you have things like that and we always, what do we always say on the show, Dave? It's do your research.
We just basically do your research because you can find out these things, and you can find out. I mean, there's a lot of information out there, and every year it feels like there's that much more information. And you'd probably laugh because even like probably some of the shows you worked on, there are probably people that are fans of the show that know more about the props than you, even though you were there. You know what I mean? Like that's the funny thing is every year there's more and more information, and every year there's better and better photos or screen grabs. And so you just gotta. You gotta do your research. It's
George, I have a Stormtrooper helmet that we've talked about ad nauseum on this podcast, but I'm going to do it again because I love it. That I bought at auction last summer, and when I bought it, I knew it was a real original. It was from A New Hope. It was from the first film. We know only about 30 to 50 helmets were made for that film. Many of them didn't survive because of the time that passed. They were ruined in filming, whatever. But there were about, say, 10 in private hands. This one was brand new, fresh to market. It had come out of an original source. It was not with a collector. Hit the auction. We knew it was real. It had all the right tells about it. At this point, they've been so gone over, everybody knows. But I bought it thinking it wasn't screen matched, because a bunch of Stormtrooper helmets from that first film in particular are screen matched because they're all completely custom painted. So if you get any kind of a close up, like Dave has
there's one set for Stun 1 because the
trooper says that
there's a paint chip and I can match the paint chip basically and go there's my helmet. So that's what you're looking for. Yeah.
Wow.
But mine did not. They looked when they ran the auction. Obviously, the auction house did a ton of research, did not find it. And then in the intervening time, the 4K release came out from Disney, and they took a second look and actually found there was on my helmet, those chevron stripes that run up the Stormtrooper's chin. The third stripe on the left side of his face is like double the thickness of the other stripes, and they managed to. The 4K resolution on the film was so good that they managed to find that guy standing in the lineup at the Death Star when the Millennium Falcon arrived. So my helmet was sold at auction, and 6 months later, same auction house managed to say, "Hey, we have great news for you. It's actually Screen Match," which is of course wonderful for the for the piece and the value of it and all that, because now I don't only have one, but it was definitely on film, and there it is. So that's that. I mean, that's the ultimate. That's what we're looking for.
Now, if you're interested in the old Toy Knights, particularly the Courtney thing, there is the Peter Greenhill's book, Heraldic Miniature Knights, is like the Bible for Courtney collectors. Is there a Bible for the movie prop collectors? Is there a book that someone getting into it should go, or a magazine they should subscribe to that would educate a newcomer about all this stuff?
There are definitely books about like the early days of movie prop collecting, and we had the author on who wrote a wonderful book about the various pairs of the ruby slippers and the various things that happened to those. Yeah, but there hasn't been probably some of the better, I guess, movie prop collecting things have been part of some of the better making of books that have come out individually over like the last couple of years, where say when they do like when Rinzler, wrote Jonathan Rinzler, who sadly recently passed away, wrote these making of Star Wars books. In these making of Star Wars books, there was a lot of prop information, even though they were not prop collecting books. But there hasn't really been a definitive book, which I think is really our way of saying, if any publishers are listening to this right now, Ryan and I would very much like to do the
authentic
stuff the dreams are made of,
the Bible
guide to prop collecting with an introduction by George R.R. Martin. I think that sells itself.
I think we
it
just
really
sold
does.
It, Dave.
Yeah,
I know nothing about this stuff, but here's two guys who know everything. That would be the introduction.
Yes, perfect. There you go.
So, George, did you keep anything from your days? Because you before Game of Thrones and all that, you had this whole career, working in television in the 70s and 80s, or was it just 80s and 90s?
80s and 90s, yeah.
Okay. Did you worked on Beauty and the Beast? You had a pilot produced. Did you keep things from those productions? Did you think to do that?
And I was just going to say, and even if it wasn't from a perspective of I'm an original prop collector, but just as an accumulator. Like you're working on Beauty and the Beast, which was such a wonderful show, and obviously still
oddly enough, that's the show that I have the most of.
Really? Oh wow!
I mean, my first show that I was on was Twilight Zone, the CBS revival of Twilight Zone.
Yes. Twilight Zone,
okay, sure.
And aside from my cast and crew jacket, I don't think I have anything from Twilight Zone. I don't think I did 5 episodes, and they were all produced. And I look back now and say, I should have kept something, but I don't know. I didn't. But on Beauty and the Beast, yeah, I did keep a number of things from some of my episodes, and I still have those. Those are pretty cool.
Do you have a favorite? Like if I was to, just say, what's your favorite Beauty and the Beast thing that you held on to? And again, the thing that means the most to you maybe, or an episode you wrote. Because I used to, I was a prop collector, but even before I was a hardcore prop collector, I always tried to take something from an episode I wrote that I would remember it by. You know what I mean? Like, and again, not from a collecting standpoint, but just like the way you buy a souvenir, on a trip, like something to remember this little adventure by.
I have a number of cool things from episodes that I wrote, but I think the thing from Beauty and the Beast that's coolest, I also have 2 sets of, the people in our underground world dressed in these kind of ragged leathers and furs, which we call tunnel togs. I have a couple sets of tunnel togs that are on display at my bookstore. But the coolest thing is, Roy Dotrice, who played the part of Father.
Yes, I forgot. I always forget.
He's great. He was a wonderful actor, wonderful man, too. We became friendly. I kept in touch with him over the years. He's sadly missed now. But Roy filmed the pilot, and then the show was picked up for series. But before he could arrive for the series, he fell down and broke his hip. So this was all before I was involved. I was hired. I was not part of the pilot, but I was hired. But they had a discussion of what are we going to do? Father is he can't walk now like he used to. it's going to take them a time to hear. Should we recast? For a time they were delaying recasting. And no, we're not going to recast. We'll make it part of his character. We'll write him in. So if you look at the original pilot, Father is getting around perfectly fine. But in all of the later episodes, he has a crutch. He has a crutch that he's moving. And he actually needed it for basically the first half of the first season. And then he didn't need it anymore, but it was established as his character. So he used it for the entire rest of the show. And they took just a crutch that they got at a, wherever you get crutches, I guess, a crutch store.
Medical supply store.
And they wrapped it in the same leather and fur and stuff like that.
Oh,
so
okay.
it was part of that. It was Father's crutch, and it's basically in every episode. Well, when the show ended, I got Father's crutch. And oddly enough, my wife,
great.
Paris, injured herself shortly thereafter and needed a crutch. So she used Father's crutch for like 6 months, getting around just like Father did. And we have it right now. It's sitting by our fireplace in our house. Father's crutch right by the fireside, sort of like Tiny Tim's crutch,
great.
in that.
That's great.
And what's cool about that is, my other props, which were from episodes I wrote, were used once in one episode. This was used in 55 episodes. So
Across
it's pretty
the
amazing.
span.
It's a pretty major
No, I think
prop.
right now, some Beauty and the Beast collectors are just like salivating, like literally, like just drool is running out of their mouths. Yeah.
Well, it's so funny we talk about Roy Dotrice because Roy read the audiobooks for A Song of Ice and Fire. And after I read the books for the first time, I bought all of the audiobooks. I bought them back when you had to get them on CD, and I like meticulously digitized them so I could listen to them on my iPod because I just loved the book so much. So that's how I would reread them. I would listen to the audiobook. And I don't know how he did this, but he managed to, with all the characters that are in Game of Thrones, managed to give a different voice to all of the characters in the book. Himself, and Arya had a voice, and Tyrion. He did Jorah, and he did Grand Maester Pycelle. He did everybody in that book differently. I still don't.
He got an award for that from the Guinness Book of World Records. They sent him a thing, most distinct voices in an audiobook, which I have now. He gave that to me. His record plaque of all that. But yes, Roy was marvelous at that, and he didn't just read the books; he acted them. He performed
them. Yeah.
And when we came out with the fourth book, A Feast for Crows, Roy was
John Lee read it,
and who was a very well received, experienced, and popular audiobook reader. But the fans rose up in fury about it. This is not the same. And the outcry was so great that they later re-recorded it with Roy. Because Roy was, it was just a matter of availability. Roy was still a working actor then. He was doing a play in Birmingham or something. He couldn't record it. So they brought in this other guy, but the fans did not accept it. So there's actually two versions of the Feast for Crows audiobook, the John Lee one and the one with Roy Dotrice.
It's funny for me now because I have two little kids who love to listen to stories, on the essentially kid versions of audiobooks when they're resting or whatever, just during snack time. And I did not realize this, but there's this whole library on Spotify of Disney stories, and a ton of them are read by Roy Dotrice. And it's so odd because I have this sense memory associated with this guy of the first experience with the Red Wedding and reading these foul things that characters do to each other in your books. And then he's reading Beauty and the Beast to my children. And I'm just waiting. I'm waiting for the, Belle to be eaten by the beast and to him talk about the viscera and all that. Thankfully it has not yet happened, but I just, the man is ever present in my household. I should say that he's greatly missed.
Yeah, he was incredible.
Did you keep anything from Game of Thrones?
Well, I have one thing from Game of Thrones that I didn't keep it. It was given to me. It was one of the dragon eggs. There were 3 dragon eggs that Danny had, and David Benioff and Dan Weiss each took one, and they gave me the third. So it's the black egg. So I guess it's Drogon that I have.
Oh,
that's
amazing!
Pretty cool.
Wow.
I did not get though. I did not get the thing that I really wanted.
What did you most want? I'm very curious. Yeah.
I wanted my own severed head. At one point, we were there's the scene where Ned has been beheaded and all of his people have been beheaded, and there's a scene where Joffrey takes Sansa and makes her look at her father's head on the wall, and there's all these other heads there. And David and Dan and I were talking, we should be there. We should each get a severed head, and next to Ned, there would be the severed heads of the two showrunners and myself. And it seemed like a great idea. And I was looking forward to that. But this was season 1. We didn't have the budget that we had in later seasons. And it turns out those severed heads are very expensive. Not only that, they're time consuming. You have to, have a mold and all of that stuff. And then they make it, and it's costly. And, we were running over budget. So David and Dan decided they couldn't do it. And instead, we just bought a box of used severed heads, which evidently you can get. So we got used severed heads.
You buy those at the crutch store. But anyway, go on.
And they actually got us in trouble because
Different
I don't know where we got the box of used severed heads. But one of them was the severed head of George W. Bush. And we mounted that on the wall. It's like 2 down from Ned. It's bald. There's no hair on it. So nobody recognized it. And that was fine until we came out with the DVDs and the Blu-rays with the commentary track. And then the director in his commentary said, look at the third severed head. That's George W. Bush. And of course, like Rush Limbaugh and, other right-wing commentators got a hold of that and went crazy. And the show should be taken off the air. Look at what they're doing to the president, the disrespect. They want his head cut. And I'm saying, we didn't cut George Bush's head off. It was somebody else cut his head off, and we bought it used, along with a lot of other people. It was just a used severed head. But I really would like to have my own severed head, and then have it, have it myself and mount it in my office or something on a spike. Everybody should have their own severed head, don't you think?
George, I think we can make that promise right now in this podcast. I'm going to make your dream come true.
I was about to say, without giving away any spoilers, can we get some severed heads in the new show? That seems possible.
I think we have a number of those coming up without giving anything away, and I think we can make your dream come true. It's not the original Game of Thrones, but it will be an original Game of Thrones universe franchise, green used George R. Martin bespoke, not out of a box of used heads, because we don't play that way on House of the Dragon. We can and will make that happen. Consider that a promise.
But you'll put him next to a George Bush head anyway. Also, you'll make one of those also. Yeah.
Dave, I feel like we can aggravate people a lot more than with George W. Bush. I mean, I think if you and I sat down and spent a couple days in the room, we could really come up with some real ideas to really agitate the modern wingnut polemic.
It's probably best though that you don't draw attention to it in the commentary on this Blu-ray. Let them try to recognize who the heads are themselves. Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, I think the head is going to be the crowning prop in your collection. So anything else from I just have to ask, because now I'm just being an absolute pain in the ass fan. The Dragon Egg's incredible. Any swords? That's my question. Any heraldic shields or anything? Just because you're into heraldry and flags? Anything else? What'd you grab? Come on.
Well, I have a lot of swords, but none of them are actually from the show. I signed, that these were books first, they were books. Right, Game of Thrones came out in 1996. I didn't even meet David and Dan till 2007. So, and the show didn't come on till 2011. So there was 15 years and all that. And the books were bestsellers, eventually, not when they first came out, but they built over the years. And during that period, I got a number of subright sales. People approached me and they wanted to, buy the rights to do a role-playing game, and I sold those, and the rights to do coins. I sold the rights to do replica coins to this guy who has a coin-making machine in his basement. And I sold the right to do replica swords to this company called Valerian Steel, or JLIC Incorporated. And they do these wonderful replica swords long before the show came on the air. So
Sure.
When the show came on the air, I actually did say, JLIC already has like 6 of the swords, beautiful replicas of it. Why don't you just use them? But they didn't want to for, I don't know, whatever reason. They had their own sword maker. So JLIC, the guy at JLIC is a smart guy. He promptly went out and negotiated with HBO, and he got the rights to do replica swords as appeared on the show. So for a number of swords, there's the book version of the sword and the show version of the sword,
Right.
which are different, but there's 2 different versions. And of course, my deal, I get copies of all the swords. So these are all JLIC swords. These are all from Valerian Steel, and I have them hanging all over my house, and some very, very, very cool ones. But they're not show used. Even the ones that are based on the show are replicas of the sword that appeared in the show, not the actual sword that appeared in the show.
Well, we can make that change too, George.
Oh,
Just saying.
very cool.
Perhaps the very sword that cuts your head off. Just saying. Yeah.
Well, your House of Dragon will actually be the first time that any of the shows have shown Dark Sister or Blackfire, because those were not around.
Oh my God! Spoiler alert! Oh my God! You heard it
Not a
here
spoiler
first.
if they've read the books.
I know. Of course, it's not.
I have to read the
Come
books.
on, we need an audience. We need an audience. Spoiler! It's a spoiler.
He's being mean to me
These
because I
people
wouldn't give it
can't
away.
read. These people
Yes.
don't read.
Yes, you will see Blackfire and Dark Sister both coming soon to a television near you.
Would you rather have your head cut off by which? Which would be your preference if one of them was going to?
Oh, that's a great question.
Like, I got to be Blackfire, be cleaner cut. Dark Sister's a slimmer sword, and
Okay, all right, good
just
to know. Good to
the
know.
one strike here.
I will jump in here for a quick second, just because obviously you and Ryan have known each other for a while now, but I think people are probably very curious, and you're going to be asked this question 4,000 times over the next 10 years, but I want to be the first person to ask it in as annoying a way as possible, which is for both of you guys. Again, I remember Ryan would occasionally say, "Oh, I was talking to George, and like with the Colony screening and some of that kind of stuff." But how did you guys working together and really this next version of this show, House of the Dragon, come about? And again, I get to be the first to ask this question and make you answer it. So, tell me about how you guys met a little bit, because I think our audience would actually really enjoy this.
I'm a super fan, and I found the books at this point over 20 years ago, and I loved them. I was a huge Tolkien fan. Lord of the Rings, just worshipped at the altar of it. The movies were coming out, and I had just reread them, and I was in this kind of fantasy mode, and I was like, what else is out there? And a friend had recommended, hey, if you love Tolkien, you should really check this out, because it's really the only thing since Tolkien that really got me up out of my seat fantasy-wise. I've liked other fantasies. I've enjoyed things. There's some great classic books out there, but nothing to me held a candle to Tolkien, but this did, and it was, of course, the first book, Game of Thrones. And I read it, and I fell all the way in. I was all in. I couldn't believe how good it was. I read all 3. There were 3 books at the time. Storm of Swords had just been published, and I just devoured them, and then went back and devoured them again, and it became my favorite thing. So, and this happened at a time where I was learning to write myself. I was very interested in screenwriting. I'd written a couple of scripts. I was starting to try to make a career of this. I was in my early 20s, and cut to a number of years later, I've now broken in. I still love these books. I'm a huge fan of the television show. I'm watching it all. At some point I tried to get my agents to get me a staff writer job on the show, and they were like, they don't have staff writers. It's just the 2 of them write the whole show. So I had written my first pilot for NBC, and it got picked up. And it was a Western, and NBC decided they were going to make it in Santa Fe, just out of total kismet. And I knew from being a stalker / superfan that George lived in Santa Fe. And I said, hey, I'm going to be out there for like 8 weeks. I knew he was repped by my agency, William Morris. And I said to them, I'm going to be here for a long time. Can I buy George dinner while I'm out there?
So this was six. This was 6.
Right.
Yeah, this was Six Gun, right? Yeah, exactly. In 2013, and so very graciously, George took up my offer, and we went out to dinner, hit it off. I invited him to set. He came to set. He hung out, I think, through most of a night shoot. I remember when we were at the Tom Ford Ranch, shooting in his western city, and it was great. It was a dream come true for me because I respected him so much and actually learned so much from him as a writer. Because I credit, even though the books are prose books, George started as a dramatic writer, a screenwriter in television. So the books are written in this, Dave, you've read them. They're written in this incredibly cinematic way with hooks at the end of chapters. There's dialogue. I mean, you could very easily just put slug lines into those books and create scenes out of them. It's not a novelistic style of writing. So I learned a lot about character and storytelling and atmosphere and theme and all these, literary tools like foreshadowing and how to write prophecy, compelling prophecy that doesn't seem dinky or foregone conclusion. All these things that I still use today that I learned from those books. So it was just really exciting for me to be able to meet George, and then we hit it off. And then on down the road we go. 5, 6, 7 years later, it turned into a job offer, which it still blows my mind that I'm sitting here doing this show all these years later when I just started out as a fan. I mean, that's sort of my end of it. I'd be curious. I think George just took pity on me.
Was that the first time we met, or had we met at Comic-Con or something like that just briefly before that?
Well, yes, we met. Funny, going deep into my nerdy past. We met at I believe Worldcon in New York. Was Worldcon hosted in New York one year when I was living there in like 2005? It was a book. It was a literary convention at the Javits Center in New York.
New York Comic-Con.
Feast for Crows.
Comic-Con. Yeah.
New York Comic-Con. Okay. So Feast for Crows had not yet been published, but was coming, which was highly anticipated because at that point the series had really blown up. I still have this thing. Random House was giving out these little kind of preview paperback books. These thin little books that had a couple of chapters of the book and George was signing them. So I went to I lived all the way on the east side, nearly on the East River, and I hoofed it across town to go meet him. But I brought with me, I wanted to go get one of these things, but I also brought with me George's Subterranean Press retrospective, which was the collection of all of his kind of not unpublished, but his lesser known, his short stories that have been published in magazines and things over time. And it was 1,000 pages. It was this giant tome, and I put it in my messenger bag and I walked across town and I got there, and the Random House person was like, "I'm sorry, he's only signing Random House stuff, and that's a different publisher." And George was like, "Oh, come on, this poor guy's sweating. He carried that thing all across. Bring it over." So that was actually, you probably don't remember that, but that was actually the first official time that we met.
Did you get one of the publicity handouts?
I did, and I still have it.
That's an unusual collectible because the fourth book was supposed to be called A Dance with Dragons, and I worked on it, and I had thousands of pages, but the end still wasn't anywhere near close. And there's some characters I'd already written 10 chapters of, other chapters I hadn't gotten to. But they decided for this convention to do this handout of like 2 chapters, and they were 2 Daenerys chapters from A Dance with Dragons. Well, sometime after that, I decided I had to split the book, Feast for Crows and Dance with Dragons, and the first one out was Feast for Crows, and Daenerys is not in it, so
not in the book.
So that's sample chapters that did not actually appear in the book that subsequently came out, but in the book after that. So that's unusual. Yeah, I don't remember that, but of course I do remember meeting you on the set of The Western, which was Six Gun, which I was familiar with because I had read the comic book. That was a successful comic book series. And I thought it was a great premise. We read all this fantasy about haunted swords and swords that have things, and this, they took that premise and they put it in a Western. Here, a haunted 6-gun in the Old West, a series of haunted 6-guns, if I remember correctly. There were like 6 of them. Yes. They each had powers. And I thought it was a really cool idea when I learned that you were shooting it in Was it Tom Ford or was it the Bonanza Creek?
No, I think it was the Tom Ford Ranch.
Tom Ford Ranch, yeah. Santa Fe is really set if Westerns ever come back. We have four old Western towns, movie towns surrounding the city. So
they're incredible.
Yeah.
It's an amazing place to film. Yeah.
Yeah. And I came down there with my Ty Frank, who later became half of the team that wrote The Expanse, was my assistant, and we drove down there together and spent most of the night watching you shoot that. And then I remember later we ran into your whole cast having dinner at Maria's.
Yes.
Great Mexican restaurant here in town.
Yes, among them Pedro Pascal, who went on to become the Red Viper.
Yes, and now the Mandalorian. He's touching all the bases.
Yes, he's done quite well. Very proud of him. He's a great guy.
He is.
So George, when as House of the Dragon started to sort of formulate in your head a little bit as a show, sort of, I guess Ryan obviously you knew him, but you guys hadn't really worked together.
We hadn't worked together, but I knew him. I like Colony and stuff like that. But also I knew that Ryan knew my world because somewhere in there between the Tom Ford Ranch and that, when we would get together for drinks in L.A. or something, Ryan had mentioned wanting to do a Dunk and Egg show to adapt my, spin-off series 100 years before the main series about Sir Duncan the Tall and his squire Egg, which is a concept I had actually pitched to HBO at the same time of Dance with the Dragons. But at that time, they weren't interested in Dunk and Egg. They said, and Ryan had expressed interest in doing that, but we had talked about that, and I knew he knew my world. We had done a round of development. If you go back, when it was clear that Game of Thrones was ending, that Dave and Dan wanted to end it after 7 seasons or something, HBO started looking to develop other shows. And the two that I pitched were Dance with a Dragon, which became House of the Dragon, and the Dunk and Egg thing. But there were a number of other shows that were developed at that time, most of them put together by writers that HBO hired, who had never read my books and who I guess had watched the show and they were doing. And when we were getting into this, I didn't want that anymore. Obviously, none of those shows ultimately got on the air. I thought, I want people, if they're going to be working in my world, I want them to actually have read my books. And I liked Ryan's work, and I knew he knew the world. He had read the books. So once again, in that bar at the Four Seasons, where it all started there.
Very faithful. And we walked out of that crazy meeting. My head was spinning. Walked out of that crazy meeting, and you were in to win yet another Emmy, I think, because I would always see you in September to win Emmys. And we ran into Nikolai Coster-Waldau, who played Jaime Lannister, out in the lobby, and you introduced me to him, and it was just like, what is happening? This is just insane. And I went home, and I remember I told my wife, this crazy meeting. George wants to hire me for this thing. He's going to tell HBO about it. And I said, because at this point I was a deeply cynical screenwriter, as we all should be. And I said, I'm never going to hear from anybody in this ever again. And I remember the next day, HBO, my agents called and said, did you have a meeting with George R.R. Martin yesterday? What happened? HBO Business Affairs just called, and they made an offer. It was this crazy thing that happened the next day, and then we were off to the races, and went out to meet George, and we broke the pilot together, the back of it, and this was 3 years ago now, but the rest is history in the writing.
And you had done Conan too, which is another thing that he knows fantasy. I mean, Robert E. Howard, Tolkien, the two giants of fantasy.
Yes, with the great Miguel Sapochnik. That was Miguel. So I met Miguel again through WME. We shared an agent. She put us together thinking that we'd be fast friends, and we were. And we developed a movie together that I had a spec that I had written that he was interested in doing, and then we had sold this Amazon series for Conan. I had spoken to the rights holders and professed my love for Conan. I said I think I can get Miguel Sapochnik involved. He wants to do. He loves Conan too, and he had already done a battle. I think he'd already filmed Battle of the Bastards at this point, and it had been out, so everybody knew his name and certainly associated him with fantasy filmmaking. So it was this big thing. So we shopped around town. Amazon made the best offer. We developed it there, and then I remember while I was they commissioned 3 scripts from me. So while I was writing them with sort of sharing them back and forth with Miguel because we were developing them together, they spent $250 million or whatever they did in Lord of the Rings, and I said, "Uh-oh."
$250 million on the first 6
Correct,
minutes.
yes.
I think,
But it's
of
going to
Lord of
be
the Rings. Yes,
6 minutes
yes.
to remember, Dave.
Well, I don't know why they wouldn't do Conan too. I mean, they're also doing Robert Jordan's book.
I know.
I think, so
I know.
Well, I will say your Conan script was great. I got lucky enough.
Oh,
to read
thank
it,
you.
So that was I did.
Oh,
I
that's
did like
that's
that
very kind.
much,
Thank
yeah.
you. But I mean, if that hadn't happened, we're not doing House of the Dragon. So
Jason Momoa at Comic-Con to having played both parts to say that Khal Drogo could kick Conan's ass.
I could see that. I could see that.
I'm going to ask one more House of Dragon question, and I'll leave you guys alone. Which is just like, George, is there anything specific that you're the most excited about just right now as we're sort of sitting in the? Obviously, you guys are shooting. You've seen some stuff. The scripts exist. You know where it's going. Obviously, you've been working on this thing for a while. Is there something you're really excited about as part of this show, other than your own head getting chopped off? Of course, yeah.
Well, yes. I've always thought this was a cool story. It's one I like. So I'm looking forward to seeing it come alive on screen. And of course, I'm looking forward to the dragons. Obviously I love the dragons. And we had 3 of them in Game of Thrones, but now we got like 17 of them. And hopefully they'll each have their own personalities. They'll be instantly recognizable when you see them, the colors and all of that. Because the dragons do have personalities in the books, and it'll be great to see that come alive. And the dragon riders. That's all pretty cool.
Well, stay tuned. I mean, I think you're going to be pretty happy, George. We're working very hard on all that, and it's deeply exciting. It's something that I'm very excited about.
And
as well.
my understanding as an Uber fan is they have some kind of a house, right? That's what I'm led to believe.
Yes.
So hopefully we get to see the house.
It's
That's gonna
Dave.
be
It's an
cool.
upstairs, downstairs tale about the have and have not dragons and how they interact with each other.
The dragons,
Correct.
servants,
And
the
they do a
dragon-
dance
the
too.
fancy
That was the
dragons.
original title, Dance of the Dragons. So
That's great. It's a
wait,
musical.
you see
I
them
hope we get to
dance.
see the dance. Yeah.
It's a musical. This was amazing, George. Thank you for doing this with us.
Oh, this is a lot of fun.
Before we sign off, there's something we do every week where we play a game where we bring up a project, a film or TV show, and we talk about it, and then Dave and I and our guest talk about what we would own if we could have anything from that project. What would it be? So I think tonight, staying on theme.
No more theme. Pick something. We go a different way. Surprise our audience. I think, honestly.
Okay. Well, so I did a little research into before this because I knew about Forbidden Planet. I've seen Forbidden Planet, but I don't know it nearly as well as George does, and we've already talked about it. But I know that George also has a number of other science fiction fantasy films on his favorites list, and there's one that stood out to me because it is one of my favorites, and I know it's a favorite of Dave's.
I agree. It is a great movie. So go ahead. Yeah.
The Road Warrior.
Yes.
So if you could
Road
have
Warrior.
if you could have any prop from the Road Warrior to hang in your office, your bookstore, your movie theater, you get to pick where you get to hang it. What would you most want to own from the Road Warrior?
Well, I'm not sure you could hang it, but the last of the V8 Interceptors.
Yes,
of course.
yes.
The car.
That's okay. Yep, totally.
The car
great.
with the that thing poking through the hood that he turns on and it accelerates and goes amazingly fast there.
Good answer. Good answer. Ryan?
For me, I think it's got to be the jacket. I love the jacket. I'm obsessed with the jacket. I love the all the different jackets as we go along, because we both talked about Fury Road. George, I know we've talked about it too. You love that film as well. I just love the different generations of Mad Max jackets. It has to be the jacket.
The jacket's fantastic. I thought about the V8 also. I thought the gyrocopter, which would just be incredible to have. Yeah.
Yes.
And by the way, I will also say the gyrocopter pilot's old-fashioned pilot helmet, or not helmet, but
the flight cap.
Yes, exactly. Cap. Exactly.
Bruce Spence was the actor. He was also in playing a different character. He was in the next.
Right. He was in the next one.
The next one. He was with the little kid in Thunderdome.
Thunderdome. Yeah.
But I am going to go, oddly enough, and all of those are great answers. But I love the feral kids. Razor boomerang, I think would be an incredible, and I'd like to think there's only like one or two of those probably. So I that would be a really cool thing to have. The Razor boomerang would be just pretty incredible. Yeah.
Do you ever see those things come up on
I've
the collecting sites that you
never seen? I'm trying to think if I've ever seen anything from Road Warrior.
Road Warrior is super rare. Things that are made in Australia tend to stay there. They don't. It's the same problem with Fury Road. Some things came out. There were a bunch of steering wheels and things.
I have a Fury Road piece.
You have an awesome piece from Fury Road. Yeah.
I have not the Hero metal one, which apparently was very heavy, but I have a lighter weight stunt version of the, I don't know what to call it,
his muzzle.
The muzzle, the mouth,
when he's the blood bag,
when he's strapped to the front of the car, and it's fantastic. It's just fantastic. But yeah, never really seen anything from Road Warrior after all these years. Occasional rumors of like bullet shell casings and stuff, but nothing that you would go like,
nothing to write
that's
home about,
incredible. But that's pretty great.
Well, this was totally excellent.
This was incredible. Yeah.
Thank you, George.
Thank you, George,
for joining us.
Oh, my pleasure. It was a lot of fun.
Please, everybody, subscribe to the podcast. Rate us 5 stars. You can find us on Twitter and Instagram at Props Podcast, and also now on Facebook. Join our Facebook group in the lively discussion there. Also at Props Podcast, and you can write us as you've always been able to at dreamsaremadeofpodcast@gmail.com. Write in, tell us what you want to hear, tell us what you would like to own from the Road Warrior or from Game of Thrones, and we will be back again next week with another exciting show. Thank you, everybody.